Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
Live from New York at the opening bell, this is Business Today. US stocks march higher after the latest inflation data fuels optimism of more rate cuts. Picking up, US inflation rose to 3%, the fastest rate since the start of the year, but still less than analysts were expecting. What does it mean for the Fed? And 50 years strong, Iceland celebrates the women's strike that paved the way for gender equality in the country. We speak to the country's leader. Plus, breaking barriers, the Bank of England's chief financial officer, Afua Che, has been named the UK's most influential black person. Welcome to Business Today, live from New York. I'm Michelle Fleuring. We start here in the United States, where the latest inflation data out is here. The numbers were delayed, I should say, by the ongoing government shutdown. Consumer prices, they rose 0.3% in September, pushing the annual inflation rate to 3%, the highest since January. This is the first major economic report since the shutdown began, and it comes just days ahead of the Federal Reserve's policy meeting. But we may not see another for a while, the White House saying that because of the shutdown, next month's figures will be delayed. Tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump have contributed so far to rising costs for imported goods, while high rents and medical costs are also hitting consumers hard. The shutdown, we should note, is in its 24th day, making it the second longest in US history, behind the 35-day lapse that we saw in late 2018. Our North America business correspondent, Erin Delmore, has been to visit one store owner in New York to find out how high inflation is impacting her business.
Boomerang Toys has been a fixture in New York City's Tribeca neighborhood for 24 years. But because of tariffs, owner Karen Barwick worries about its future.
How much of the merchandise here is made outside of the U.S.?
I would say probably 95%.
And how much do you think is made in China?
I would say probably 85 to 90%.
Over the last 6 months, the Trump administration has put tariffs in place that are raising the costs of goods in the U.S. Tariffs on imports from China have soared into the triple digits, and small business owners like Karen are paying the price.
Tariffs are a tax on Americans, they're a tax on consumers. No matter what this administration says, or maybe this administration doesn't actually understand who they're hurting and how they're hurting, but it is 100% all of us as American citizens who are feeling this pain.
S&P Global estimates that tariffs will cost businesses in the U.S. an additional $1.2 trillion this year, with 2/3 of those costs being passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices.
These are Coral dolls, are made by a French company, but they are made in China. The price of the dolls have gone up about $15.
She worries that smaller profit margins and slower consumer spending could force her shop to close.
How stressed are you about your ability to continue having this store here?
100% stressed all the time. Unfortunately, I really want to keep this going. I love this store. You know, I've built it from scratch. And I love the community. I love being part of the community. I've watched kids grow from pre-K to college, and I love that. But this is the most difficult time we've ever had to face.
Erin Delmore, BBC News, New York.
The perspective there from one business owner speaking to my colleague Erin Delmore. Well, for The View from Wall Street, I'm joined by Ed Moyer, market intelligence strategist at AlphaSense. Ed, always good to see you on the programme. What is your reaction? What stood out to you in this inflation report?
Thank you, Michelle. Well, Wall Street is embracing this inflation report. I think there was downside surprises, which is clearly showing that the trend of inflation is coming down. Now, the uncertainty for the outlook going forward is going to cloud the visibility on what the Fed can signal, but for the most part, we're not seeing a sharp appreciation. Yes, the tariffs are having an impact, as you could see it with apparel prices, but for the most part, there is signs of a slowdown, and I think the data, for the most part, should allow the Fed to continue with this easing cycle. And for the most part, shelter prices was one of the things that a lot of people were focused on. Now, there was a downside surprise, the slowest pace since 2021, but some economists might kind of hold off on putting a lot of weight on that one reading. So we'll wait until we get the cleaner readings, which might not take place till next year.
So it sounds like you're expecting the Fed to cut next week. Beyond that, what are you looking at? And does it matter that the Fed will be flying blind since we won't have any more data while the shutdown continues?
Well, I think right now the analysts are really, concentrating their efforts on trying to get whatever data they can that will provide clearer signals on the labor market, on inflation. So a lot of this private data, there's tremendous demand for that, and I think you're starting to see more signs about more weakness across lower and middle income households. I think the inflation story has, primarily revolved around tariffs, and we've seen a lot of mitigation efforts, regionalizations. These costs are, being reflected in these earnings results, and I think for the most part, not much has really changed. I think there's still a firm belief that we will get more rate cuts.
You mentioned their tariffs and the role that trade has played in all of this. Donald Trump said he was ending trade talks overnight with Canada because of an ad campaign launched by the province of Ontario. That was set to air on American television and featured President Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. How much of an issue do you think that's going to be for the economy, both here and north of the border?
The coverage with that tweet is going to be, I think, a big focus for a lot of people. But I think we should, remind ourselves next week is going to be a pivotal week, not just with trade talks with President Trump and Carney. You're going to see Trump and Xi remain a big focal point. I think there is this overall belief that you'll see heightened threats leading up to these gatherings, but for the most part, I think the consensus on the street is that you'll probably see some type of de-escalation, some type of compromise, that we'll see an extension of some tariff relief. I think both, these excessive tariffs would punish both economies. So I think there's not an expectation that this will actually be how things unfold.
Yeah, all eyes turn to Asia, as you say, for that meeting next week between Xi and Trump. Ed Moyer from Alpha Sense, always good to chat.
Thank you.
Now, 50 years ago today, Iceland came to a standstill as 90% of its women walked off the job in a powerful stand for equality. 25,000 filled Reykjavik's main square, a strike that sparked change and led to Iceland's Equal Rights Act the following year. Today, Iceland still leads the world in gender parity, topping the Global Gender Gap Report for the 16th straight year. And to mark the milestone, Prime Minister Kristin Frostadóttir spoke with our very own Julia Caesar about the strike's lasting legacy and how Iceland is navigating today's global economy.
There's an immense sense of pride among Icelanders, not just Icelandic women, but Icelanders as a whole, about the impact that this made both here but also globally. And it also, I think, just sends such a clear message of how important women are, how important it is that women participate in the workforce, because that's always been our strength, that we've had a high participation of women in the workplace here. So we need to carry that information forward.
Now, many economies have been struggling recently. How is the Icelandic economy faring?
Inflation and interest rates is always a big topic here. I mean, you won't meet an Icelander who doesn't know what the inflation rate is. It's very stubborn here, inflation, and is still around 4%, and we would like to see it go lower. So we're focusing on elements in the housing market and also balancing the budget here on the governmental side to keep that down. So challenges that a lot of economies are dealing with, but I think the message out there is that we're diversifying, we're trying to increase productivity here and high value jobs. So this growth will be strong for our economy.
How do you see trade and the global economy impacting what you want to do over perhaps, say, the next few years?
Everyone is concerned about the change in tone when it comes to international trade. I will say that very honestly. I mean, Icelanders have built a strong economy here and a good relationship with our next neighbors. And it's obviously concerning change if we're going towards more tariffs. I am willing to be, and Iceland is willing to be an active engager in those discussions, how we can do better in multilateralism. But anything that we can do to reduce the international tensions when it comes to tariffs is very important for a small country like Iceland, and to most countries in this world, to be honest.
Now, turning to the UK, where barriers are being broken, the Chief Financial Officer of the Bank of England, the UK's central bank, has been named the country's most influential black person. Afua Che, who oversees the bank's £1 trillion balance sheet, tops this year's Power List, which celebrates black excellence and leadership across Britain. Our UK correspondent, Adina Campbell, met the trailblazing finance leader who's breaking barriers at the heart of one of the world's most powerful financial institutions.
Afua Che has always aimed high. After achieving 6 A-levels, she went on to study chemistry at Oxford University. As one of the country's most senior financial leaders, as CFO at the Bank of England, the mum of 4 has now topped this year's Black Power List, which celebrates the most influential black people in the UK.
It's incredibly humbling, and it's showcasing black talent and showing that we have black leaders excelling in all fields and all industries.
Your first job in financial services, when did that start, and how much of an effect has that had on kind of your career so far?
After university, I trained to be a chartered accountant in London, and then I became an investment banker, and I got my first chief financial officer role in a corporate bank, and I did that for about 7 years, and I then was recruited to become the Chief Financial Officer of the Bank of England, and at the time Mark Carney was the governor, and he now is of course the Prime Minister of Canada. I'm responsible for the financial oversight of our balance sheet, which was over £1.1 trillion during the pandemic and has now come down to about 870 billion.
£1 trillion, most people will be wondering, what does that even look like? That's an incredible amount of money.
Huge amount of money. And I'm also responsible for helping to shape the Bank of England's strategy.
And for people who think, how can someone in such a senior position in one of, such an important institution in the UK have that work-life balance? How do you do it? What's your mantra?
You know what? Growing up, particularly in an investment bank, I didn't see so many women in big leadership roles who had families. And I know that there are lots of women who think that they need to choose between work and having a family. But actually, what I love about the Bank of England is that we really support working families and working parents. The most important choice to make is the culture of the organisation that you're actually joining. You don't need to choose between work and family, just choose the right culture.
Thanks for watching Business Today. Goodbye.